Let's talk about something that no one wants to say out loud. Nice guys are not unattractive because they're kind. They're unattractive because they lack something far more important: self-respect, boundaries, and masculine polarity. You see, being nice is not a personality, it's often a mask to hide fear of rejection, a mask to avoid conflict, a mask to manipulate approval. Kindness is beautiful when it comes from a place of strength. But when it's rooted in desperation, in people-pleasing, in needing to be liked, it becomes weakness. A man who puts everyone else on a pedestal is showing the world he doesn't value himself, and that energy is repelling. It's not inspiring. It doesn't spark attraction. It sparks obligation, because let's be honest, women don't want a man who worships them. They want a man who respects them, but who also respects himself enough to walk away when he's not treated right. The nice guy gives too much too soon to prove he's worthy, but a man who knows his worth doesn't chase validation. He doesn't try to be chosen, he chooses. Confidence, purpose, leadership, these are the traits that attract. Not constant availability, not bending over backwards to please someone who hasn't earned it, not sacrificing your truth to avoid rejection. And here's the irony: the moment a man stops trying to be nice to get attention and starts being real, being grounded, being mission-focused, he becomes magnetic. Because what women are drawn to isn't a man who's always agreeable, it's a man who knows who he is, who leads with clarity, and who makes decisions from power, not fear. So no, the issue isn't being too nice. The issue is being too passive, too needy, too unaware of your value. Stop trying to be liked. Start becoming the man who is respected. Because the truth is, respect is the real foundation of attraction. Kindness is often seen as one of the most beautiful traits a person can possess. It speaks of warmth, compassion, empathy, and a genuine desire to uplift others. But what we rarely talk about is the dark side of kindness. When it lacks boundaries, it turns into self-betrayal. When kindness becomes a tool for approval or a mask to avoid conflict, it no longer serves its true purpose. It becomes a form of weakness, and eventually it strips you of your power, your identity, and your value in the eyes of others. The problem isn't kindness, the problem is the intention behind the kindness. Because when you give from a place of fullness, from a secure sense of self, your kindness becomes powerful. It becomes an extension of strength, not a substitute for it. But when you give to gain, when you give to be accepted, when you say yes when your heart says no, that's not kindness. That's fear. That's insecurity disguised as virtue. That's the root of resentment. And it's why people who are too nice often feel unappreciated, overlooked, or taken for granted. There's a huge difference between being kind and being a doormat. Kindness involves empathy, yes, but true kindness also involves truth. It means being honest about how you feel. It means being willing to say, I care about you, but I also care about me. It means being strong enough to say no when something doesn't align with your values. But people pleasers, especially those labeled as nice guys, often confuse kindness with compliance. They think that if they just love harder, sacrifice more, or stay quiet when they're disrespected, eventually they'll be seen, chosen, or loved back. But that's not how respect works. That's not how attraction works. In fact, the very act of having no boundaries sends a subconscious message to others: I do not value myself enough to protect my energy. And people respond to that message. They might not say it aloud, but they sense it, they feel it. And slowly they start to pull away. They start to lose respect, not because you're too good to them, but because you're not good to yourself. Let's get real. People aren't drawn to desperation. They're drawn to energy, to clarity, to strength. If your kindness is coming from a space of wanting to be chosen, then it's manipulative, even if unintentionally, because you're giving not to give, but to get. You're giving love to get love. You're giving effort to get validation. That's a transaction, not a relationship. And when you start doing that, you start losing yourself in the process. You abandon your truth for temporary connection. You abandon your needs, your boundaries, your peace, just to hold on to someone who might not even value what you're offering. And then when they walk away, you're left wondering, what did I do wrong? I was so nice. I gave them everything. Yes, that was the mistake. You gave everything without discernment. You gave before it was earned. You gave more than you had to offer. And instead of being appreciated, you were seen as someone who doesn't know their worth. People don't respect what comes too easy. It's human psychology. What is rare is valued. What is common is overlooked. If your time, your energy, your loyalty is available to anyone without requiring respect in return, then your kindness will be seen as cheap, not because it is, but because it's been misused. And that's on you. Because at some point you have to stop blaming others for walking over you. At some point you have to take responsibility for the lack of boundaries you've allowed, for the times you said yes when you wanted to scream no, for the moments you let your silence speak when you should have spoken up, for the times you tolerated what was unacceptable because you were too afraid to be alone or to be disliked or to be seen as difficult. Being kind does not mean being weak. It does not mean being silent. It does not mean making yourself smaller just to make others comfortable. Real kindness includes having the courage to set standards, to draw lines, to walk away from people, situations, and dynamics that dishonor your soul. The most powerful people are not the loudest, the flashiest, or the most aggressive. The most powerful people are those who know their values and aren't afraid to protect them with love, but with firmness, with grace, but with backbone. That's what strength looks like. That's what real kindness looks like. Because when you start respecting yourself, your energy changes. You stop chasing people. You stop trying to prove your worth. You stop bending over backwards for those who wouldn't lift a finger for you. And ironically, that's when people start respecting you. That's when you become attractive. Not because you're performing, but because you're aligned. You're clear. You're no longer seeking love externally. You've become the source of it within yourself. Too many people confuse kindness with being easy to manipulate, but the strongest people are kind and direct, compassionate but assertive, loving but not self-abandoning. They don't need to please everyone. They need to stay true to themselves. And in doing so, they create deeper, more authentic connections with those who truly value their presence. If you've ever felt drained from being too nice, take a hard look at your boundaries. Ask yourself, why am I saying yes to things that hurt me? Why am I afraid to speak up? What am I trying to earn that I haven't already given to myself? Because the truth is, you don't need to prove anything to anyone. Your worth is not up for negotiation. Your value does not increase based on how many people you please. Your life is not a charity for emotionally unavailable people. Start being intentional with your kindness. Give from a full cup. Love people, yes, but love yourself more. Because the right people will never ask you to shrink to fit into their world. The right people will meet you at your level. They'll respect your no. They'll admire your boundaries. They'll see your kindness not as weakness, but as a reflection of your strength. And for those who don't, let them go, let them walk, let them misunderstand you. You are not responsible for managing everyone's comfort at the expense of your own soul. So the next time you feel the urge to be nice, ask yourself, am I being kind or am I being afraid? Am I honoring my truth or am I trying to avoid confrontation? Am I loving this person or am I abandoning myself just to keep the peace? Because you can't call it kindness if it's costing you your peace. You can't call it generosity if it's draining your spirit. And you definitely can't call it love if it's rooted in fear. Your heart is not a doormat. Your soul is not up for sale. You were not put on this earth to be liked by everyone. You were put here to be real, to be whole, to be powerful. And that starts by drawing the line between love and self-abandonment. Because at the end of the day, kindness is not about how much you give. It's about how much of yourself you refuse to lose in the process. Self-respect is the foundation of true attractiveness. It's not about arrogance, pride, or a superiority complex. It's about knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what you will or will not tolerate. It's a quiet confidence, a rooted energy, and a silent but undeniable message that says, I know my worth. And that, more than anything else, is magnetic. People who chase approval live their lives on edge. They constantly scan the room, the conversation, the social media posts, wondering, did they like that? Was that enough? Do they see me now? It's exhausting. And more than that, it's unattractive, because approval seeking is based on the assumption that who you are isn't enough unless someone else confirms it. And the second you put that power into someone else's hands, you shrink. You become someone they can mold, someone they can control, someone who bends and twists for the sake of being liked, rather than standing tall for the sake of being respected. When someone respects themselves, they don't beg for love, they don't chase validation, and they certainly don't compromise their values just to fit in. They understand a powerful truth. Not everyone is supposed to like you, and that's okay. In fact, it's necessary, because when you try to be everything for everyone, you become nothing to yourself. You dilute your personality, your opinions, your truth, just to be accepted by people who may not even be aligned with your purpose. That's not love. That's survival. That's performing. And eventually, you'll feel empty from playing a role that was never meant to be yours in the first place. Approval seeking is rooted in insecurity. It comes from a place of thinking, if I just do more, say more, give more, they'll choose me. But self-respect says, I choose me first, and anyone who aligns with that choice is welcome to walk with me. That shift in energy changes everything. It changes how people see you. It changes how they treat you. It changes who you attract. Because people are not drawn to desperation. They are drawn to certainty. They are drawn to the person who walks into a room and doesn't need to dominate it, but commands attention simply by being grounded. When you have self-respect, you're not performing for anyone. You don't need to be louder, prettier, funnier, or smarter than the next person. You're simply whole, you're aligned. And that energy makes people curious. It makes them wonder what you know about yourself that they don't. It makes them lean in, not because you begged for their attention, but because your presence is undeniable. When you respect yourself, your standards change. You no longer tolerate relationships that drain you. You no longer entertain conversations that feel fake. You no longer chase people who are emotionally unavailable, hoping that your love will be enough to change them. Because now you understand that real love doesn't require you to lose yourself. Real connection doesn't require you to abandon your values. You stop seeing rejection as a reflection of your worth, and you start seeing it as a redirection away from what was never meant for you. Self-respect is not about cutting people off to prove a point. It's about being so rooted in your truth that you don't even engage with what dishonors your spirit. You don't explain your worth. You don't convince someone to see your value. You embody it. And those who can't see it aren't your people. That's not loss. That's alignment. People who constantly seek approval give away pieces of themselves in exchange for temporary connection. They say yes when they want to say no. They smile when they're hurting. They tolerate disrespect because they're more afraid of being alone than being disrespected. But what they don't realize is that every time you betray yourself to keep someone else happy, you teach your nervous system that your needs don't matter. And over time, that becomes your identity. But the moment you reclaim your self-respect, everything begins to shift. You stop looking outward for validation. You start looking inward for peace. You realize that the love you were begging others to give you is the love you needed to give yourself all along. You stop asking, do they like me? And you start asking, do I like the way I show up around them? You stop adjusting your personality just to be accepted, and you start embracing your full unapologetic self, even if that means being misunderstood by some. Because let's be honest, true connection doesn't require performance. It requires authenticity, and authenticity can only exist when self-respect is present. When you know who you are and what you stand for, you stop settling for breadcrumbs. You stop glorifying emotional unavailability. You stop calling inconsistency passion and start seeing it for what it is: confusion, chaos, and a waste of your time. The people who carry the most peace are not the ones who have the most attention. They're the ones who have the most alignment. They're not chasing the spotlight, they're choosing their peace. They're not loud about their standards, but their energy speaks volumes, and people feel it. They feel safe around someone who respects themselves, because self-respect creates a natural boundary. It communicates, this is what I allow, this is what I don't, and I don't need to explain it to you for it to be valid. When you embody self-respect, you stop fearing silence, you stop fearing space. You no longer panic when someone pulls away because your self-worth isn't tied to their presence. You understand that you are the home, not the guest, that anyone who comes into your life is adding to it, not defining it. And that clarity gives you freedom to walk away, freedom to say no, freedom to choose peace over pressure. Approval seeking keeps you in emotional debt. Self-respect makes you emotionally wealthy. Approval seeking will drain your soul. Self-respect will elevate your spirit. One keeps you in cycles of anxiety and neediness. The other brings you back to power, to clarity, to wholeness. There is nothing more attractive than someone who is kind, compassionate, and grounded in their self-worth. That balance of heart and backbone, that ability to love deeply without losing yourself. That confidence that says, I bring value by simply being myself, and I don't need to prove it to anyone. That's the kind of energy that turns heads, not because it's loud, but because it's real. And when you live from that place, when you embody self-respect on a soul level, you no longer look for love in places that hurt. You no longer attach your worth to how others respond to you. You no longer settle for being tolerated when you know you were meant to be celebrated. You understand that not everyone will value you, but the ones who do will never ask you to shrink. They'll honor your presence. They'll rise to meet your energy. They'll love you for the very things you once tried to hide. So choose self-respect every time, even when it's hard, even when it's lonely, even when it means letting go of people you once thought were your forever. Because the more you respect yourself, the more life starts to reflect that back to you, in your relationships, in your opportunity, in your peace, and in the way you finally stop chasing love and start becoming it. Masculine polarity is not about domination, aggression, or control. It's not about being the loudest person in the room or projecting a fake image of power. True masculine polarity is about direction. It's about presence. It's about living with unwavering purpose and refusing to drift through life waiting for permission to be great. Masculine polarity isn't found in passive approval seeking or the need to please. It's rooted in the strength of a man who knows exactly who he is and where he's going. The reason so many men today feel disconnected from their masculinity is because they've been taught to suppress it in the name of being agreeable. They've been conditioned to think that being soft, emotionally available, and endlessly accommodating is the way to be loved. But what they weren't told is that when you abandon your mission for the sake of being accepted, you lose the very energy that makes you powerful. You lose the fire, you lose the edge, you lose the part of you that leads, protects, and provides, not just in the physical sense, but emotionally and spiritually. Masculine energy is forward moving. It is structured, clear, and intentional. It's not about control, but about responsibility. It's about showing up with direction, making decisions with confidence, and standing firm when life throws chaos your way. When a man has no purpose, he becomes passive. And passivity in a man doesn't inspire love. It creates confusion, it creates resentment, it creates emotional instability, not just in himself, but in everyone who relies on him. A man without purpose becomes reactive instead of proactive. He waits for life to happen. He waits for someone else to lead. He waits for others to tell him who he is and what he should do. And in that waiting, he gives his power away. He becomes overly emotional, easily swayed, and unsure of himself. And that uncertainty leaks into everything: his relationships, his work, his mindset. Because without purpose, masculine energy cannot thrive. It has no direction to channel itself into. It becomes stagnant, and stagnancy is the death of attraction, the death of leadership, the death of self-worth. Purpose doesn't have to be grand. It doesn't have to be building empires or leading nations. Purpose is alignment. Purpose is intention. It's waking up with a reason. It's choosing a direction and staying on it even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. That consistent drive, that inner compass that refuses to quit, that is masculine polarity. That is what creates a sense of groundedness, of leadership, of undeniable presence. That's what women are drawn to. Not the guy who texts back in 5 seconds every time. Not the man who agrees with everything she says just to avoid conflict. Not the one who lets her lead every decision in the relationship because he's afraid to upset her. What's attractive is a man who can listen, love, and still lead. Because here's the truth. No one feels safe around a man who's disconnected from his purpose, not even himself. A man who doesn't know where he's going will constantly look for direction from others. He'll project his fears, his doubts, and his insecurities onto the people closest to him. He'll become clingy, controlling, or emotionally volatile, not because he's bad, but because he's lost. And the thing about masculine energy is this: when it's not rooted in purpose, it either turns passive or aggressive. It's either collapsing or overcompensating. Neither is healthy, neither is attractive, neither is sustainable. But when a man is locked into his purpose, everything changes. He's no longer easily shaken. He's no longer desperately searching for meaning in other people. He's no longer trying to be enough for anyone because he knows he's already walking in his truth. That kind of man brings peace with him. He brings clarity. His decisions are not based on fear, but on vision. His words carry weight, not because he demands authority, but because he's earned it through discipline, through consistency, through staying the course when others would quit. And that's the kind of energy that creates trust. That's the kind of energy that inspires respect. That's the kind of energy that holds space for others to feel safe, grounded, and supported. Not because he's trying to fix them, but because his presence alone is stabilizing. He's not swayed by chaos, he anchors it. That's what true masculine polarity is, and you can't fake it. You can't perform it. You can't mimic it by copying behaviors. It has to be cultivated from the inside out. It has to be forged through struggle, clarity, and relentless commitment to your path. Too many men today think they need to soften themselves to be loved. They think that if they just tone down their ambition, if they just hold back their opinions, if they just stop leading and let everyone else decide, they'll be more accepted. But the truth is, the world isn't lacking soft men. The world is lacking grounded men. Men who are emotionally intelligent and mission-focused. Men who can hold space for others without losing themselves. Men who can feel deeply without being ruled by their emotions. That is true balance. That is true masculinity. When a man stands in his purpose, his energy shifts. He no longer needs external validation. He no longer operates from lack. He becomes a giver, not from desperation, but from abundance. He's not seeking someone to complete him because he's already whole. And that wholeness is rare. That wholeness is what creates deep attraction, deep respect, and deep love. Not surface level romance, not fleeting attention, but soul level connection. And yes, it requires work. It requires sacrifice. It requires a man to face his weaknesses, to take full responsibility for his growth, to let go of distractions and step into discipline. It requires him to walk away from comfort and into challenge. But that's where his power lives. That's where his masculinity is refined. Because a man without purpose is a man without identity, and a man without identity will always be at the mercy of those who have one. The more a man anchors into his purpose, the more magnetic he becomes, not because of how much he says or does, but because of how he shows up. He doesn't need to prove anything. He doesn't need to over-explain. His presence speaks louder than his words. He walks into a room and people feel it, not because he's trying to dominate, but because he's aligned. And alignment is powerful. It's undeniable. It's attractive on a soul level. And when you meet a man like that, one who's deeply rooted in his purpose, you feel it. You trust him, not just with your heart, but with your energy, because you know he's not going to abandon himself to please you. You know he's not going to crumble under pressure. You know he's not looking for you to give his life meaning. He already has that. And because of that, he has the capacity to truly love. To love from a place of fullness, not need. To give without attachment. To stay steady when emotions rise. To protect, not out of fear, but out of commitment. This is why masculine polarity can never come from passivity. Passivity is the absence of decision, the absence of direction, the absence of strength. It's playing small, it's waiting for life to happen instead of creating it. And in that space, masculinity dies. But when a man steps into his purpose, when he commits to his path, when he stops living for approval and starts living for alignment, everything in his world transforms. He attracts better relationships. He commands deeper respect. He feels more peace because he's no longer scattered. He's no longer trying to be someone he's not. He's no longer outsourcing his worth. He's moving with clarity, with vision, with intention. That's where masculine polarity lives. Not in pleasing, not in performing, but in purpose, in presence, in the unwavering decision to live life fully, courageously, and unapologetically. Stop trying to be chosen. Stop choosing. There is a massive shift in energy, in identity, in power when you stop waiting to be picked and start deciding who and what aligns with the life you are building. We live in a culture that has romanticized the idea of being the one they notice, the one they fall in love with, the one who's different from the rest. And in that romanticism, many people, especially women, have unknowingly put their worth in the hands of someone else's selection. But being chosen is not the goal. Choosing is. When you are constantly trying to be chosen, your life becomes a performance. You start molding yourself to fit into someone else's idea of what's lovable, desirable, or acceptable. You begin adjusting your energy based on how much attention you're getting. You start obsessing over whether you're good enough for someone else instead of asking if they're even right for you. And the problem with that is it disconnects you from your own power, because in trying to be chosen, you abandon the part of you that's meant to lead your life, your intuition, your boundaries, your standards, your voice. The truth is, not everyone is qualified to choose you. Not everyone has the eyes to see your value or the heart to hold your depth. And that's okay. You were never meant to be a match for everyone. The problem is when you're fixated on being chosen, you don't see this as alignment, you see it as rejection. And then you work harder to be seen. You become overly available, overly understanding, overly flexible, hoping that if you just do more, they'll finally pick you. But let's be honest, that's not love. That's emotional labor rooted in fear. That's bending backwards to earn something that should flow naturally. That's trading your self-respect for temporary validation. There is something incredibly powerful that happens when you flip the script, when you stop walking into rooms wondering if you're enough, and you start asking, is this space worthy of me? Does this connection reflect my values? Is this person aligned with my peace? You stop trying to convince people to choose you, and you start choosing yourself. That's not arrogance, that's awareness. That's knowing that your time, your energy, your love, and your presence are not to be handed out like discounts in desperation. They are to be offered from a place of fullness, from a place of truth, from a place of clarity. When you are focused on being chosen, you ignore red flags, you tolerate inconsistency, you rationalize poor behavior, you make excuses for lack of effort. Why? Because the need to be picked overrides your standards. But when you're focused on choosing, you move differently. You're not emotionally tied to outcomes. You're emotionally rooted in alignment. You don't chase, you observe. You don't beg, you discern. You know that chemistry isn't enough without character. You know that attention isn't love. You know that energy doesn't lie. And when something feels off, you don't gaslight yourself into staying, you walk. There is peace in choosing. There is confidence in knowing that you don't have to be everything for everyone. There's freedom in understanding that rejection is not a reflection of your inadequacy, but a redirection toward your alignment. You're not on this earth to win people over. You're here to build a life that reflects your purpose, your calling, your truth. And the people who are meant to walk with you, they'll never make you beg for the very things you're worthy of. They'll meet you in your wholeness. They'll rise to your standards. They'll choose you, yes, but only because you first chose yourself. This is what real self-worth looks like. It's not loud. It's not attention-seeking. It's not rooted in aesthetics or approval. It's quiet, grounded, and unshakable. It's the way you carry yourself when no one's watching. It's the way you walk away from situations that don't honor you, even if you still care. It's the way you refuse to lower your frequency just to keep someone interested. It's the way you know that your life isn't on pause while someone decides if you're enough. You're not waiting, you're not hoping, you're building, you're choosing, you're creating a life that reflects the value you already carry. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you don't want love. It means you want real love, not performative love, not transactional love, not love that depends on how little of yourself you're willing to be. Real love, the kind that sees you, honors you, respects you, grows with you. And you can't attract that kind of love when you're busy performing for people who can't meet you there. You attract what you reflect. So if you're always giving your energy to people who treat you like an option, ask yourself, are you choosing them from your power or from your wounds? Because trying to be chosen often comes from unhealed places, from childhood stories of not being enough, from past relationships that conditioned you to settle, from a society that taught you that your worth is only as strong as your desirability. But none of those things are truth. They're just old programming. And at some point you have to stop living from those stories. At some point you have to stop chasing people who don't see you. At some point you have to stop shrinking in rooms that are too small for your spirit. At some point you have to choose you fully, unapologetically, relentlessly. Because when you do, everything changes. You stop waiting for closure. You give it to yourself. You stop asking people to explain their poor treatment. You accept that their behavior is their truth. You stop overextending to keep the peace. You start choosing your peace. And the more you choose yourself, the more your life begins to align, not because it gets easier, but because you get clearer, clear on who you are, clear on what you deserve, clear on what you will no longer tolerate. That clarity is power. That clarity is peace. That clarity is what allows you to sit in your worth, even when it's lonely, because you know that your solitude is not emptiness, is a sacred space of rebuilding, of healing, of aligning. You're not waiting for someone to complete you. You are completing yourself. You are becoming so full of your own presence, so anchored in your own truth, that when someone does come along, they are not the source of your joy. They are an extension of it. And that's the difference. When you're trying to be chosen, love feels like survival. But when you are choosing, love becomes a celebration. You're not trying to prove your worth. You're sharing it. You're not begging to be seen. You're showing up already seen, already valued, already loved by the one person who will never leave you, yourself. So stop shrinking, stop performing, stop editing yourself to fit into boxes that were never meant for you. Stop giving your power to people who haven't earned access to your heart. Stop waiting for someone else to choose you and start choosing the life, the energy, the love, the peace, and the purpose that already belongs to you. You are not here to be picked. You are here to pick yourself every single day. And the moment you do, you'll stop wondering if you're enough. You'll know you are, not because someone told you, but because you decided. And that decision, that is where your power begins.